The morning Imara lost her job was the same morning she saved a man's life. She had been working the overnight shift at Meridian Tower, one of the tallest office buildings in downtown Atlanta. Her job title was Lobby Security Officer, but most nights the work was simple. Sign in the late workers, check bags at the entrance, make sure the doors were locked by midnight. She had been doing it for 14 months. It was not the job she had imagined for herself when she graduated from Clark Atlanta University 3 years before. But after her husband Khaled died, she had stopped imagining. That night, a Thursday in late October, Imara was at her post near the front desk when she heard the elevator doors open. It was almost 11:30. The building was mostly empty. She looked up, expecting to see one of the IT contractors who sometimes worked late on the 4th floor. Instead, she saw a man in a dark suit stumble forward through the elevator doors and fall to his knees on the marble floor. Imara stood up. The man was reaching toward the wall, trying to hold himself up. His breathing was wrong. She could see it from across the lobby, shallow, gasping, like someone trying to breathe through a narrow straw. She knew the protocol. The handbook was very clear. Security officers were not permitted to administer assistance assigned to building occupants or visitors. In the event of a medical emergency, the officer on duty was to call 911, notify the building supervisor, and remain at the security post. Do not touch. Do not move. Do not attempt to assist. Imara looked at the man on the floor. Then she looked at the phone on her desk. She called 911. But even as she was on the phone giving the address, she was already walking toward him. She could not help it. Something in her body moved before her mind could argue. She knelt beside him, told him to stay still, loosened the collar of his shirt, and tilted his head back gently so his airway would open. She kept talking to him. She told him his name. She didn't know his name, but she talked anyway. She said, "Help is coming." She said, "Stay with me." She said, "You're going to be okay." By the time the paramedics arrived 6 minutes later, the man was still conscious. One of the paramedics told her she had done the right thing by loosening his collar and keeping his airway clear. Imara walked back to her post. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she felt calm inside. She did not know that her supervisor, Mr. Reeves, had been watching everything through the security camera feed from his home office across town. The call came at 7 in the morning, right as her shift was ending. Mr. Reeves's voice was flat and careful. He told her she had violated the company's liability policy. He told her that Meridian Security Services could not be held responsible for what untrained personnel did when they interfered with medical situations. He told her that her decision to leave her post and make physical contact with a building occupant had exposed the company to risk. Imara stood in the lobby with her phone pressed against her ear and listened. She tried to explain. She said the man could barely breathe. She said she called 911 first. She said she didn't move him. She only helped him breathe. Mr. Reeves said he understood, but the policy was the policy. She would receive her final paycheck by direct deposit within 3 business days. She could collect her belongings before 8 o'clock, before the morning shift arrived. Imara put the phone in her pocket. She stood there for a moment in the empty lobby, looking at the place on the marble floor where the man had fallen. Then she picked up her bag, walked through the glass doors, and stepped out into the cold Atlanta morning. She sat on the bus going home and looked out the window and did not cry. She had learned, in the years since Khaled died, that crying too soon used up the strength she would need later. Imara lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in East Point with her younger sister Adisa, who was 17 and still in high school. Their mother had passed 5 years ago. Their father had been gone since before that, so it was just the two of them. Imara working nights, Adisa going to school days, the two of them crossing paths in the mornings over reheated coffee, and a few exchanged words before Imara slept and Adisa left for class. She did not tell Adisa right away. She made breakfast, watched her sister eat, walked her to the bus stop. Then she came home and sat at the kitchen table and did the math on a notepad. Rent was $1,200 a month. Her final paycheck would cover 1 month, maybe. She had a little saved, not much. Adisa needed new shoes for school and had a field trip coming up that cost $40. The electric bill was due in 2 weeks. Imara stared at the numbers on the notepad. Then she tore the page off. folded it, and put it in her pocket like a reminder she had to carry with her now. She started applying for jobs the next morning. She wore her good blazer to every interview. She brought printed copies of her resume, even when the application had been submitted online. She arrived early. She smiled. She answered every question the way she had practiced in front of the bathroom mirror the night before. The answers were almost always some version of the same thing. "We're looking for someone with more experience in this area. We'll keep your resume on file. We've decided to move forward with another candidate." One hiring manager, a woman at a property management company downtown, had looked at Imara's resume and tilted her head slightly. She said, "I see you worked in building security. Why did you leave?" Imara had said the position was eliminated, which was not exactly a lie. The manager had nodded slowly and written something on her notepad. Imara didn't get a call back. Weeks passed. Imara took whatever she could find. She worked a 3-day catering job for an event company on Peachtree. She cleaned offices on weekends for a service that paid cash. She babysat for a neighbor on the 4th floor who worked double shifts at the hospital. Each small thing helped, but only barely, and the numbers on her notepad kept changing in the wrong direction. By December, she was 2 weeks behind on rent. Her landlord, Mr. Patterson, was an older man who had known her since she first moved in. He came to her door on a Tuesday evening, with his hands in his coat pockets and his face looking like he did not want to be there. He said he was sorry. He said he had given her extra time because he knew she was a good tenant. Always paid on time before. Always kept the place clean. But his daughter was getting married and he needed to sell the building. And the new owners had already said they needed the units vacant by the 1st of the year. January 1st, 6 weeks away. Imara stood in the doorway and heard every word, and kept her face very still so Adisa, watching television in the living room, wouldn't know something was wrong. After Mr. Patterson left, she closed the door and went to the bathroom and turned on the faucet and stood over the sink for a long time. She thought about Kool-Aid. She thought about how he used to say that life was not always straight, that sometimes it curved so hard you couldn't see what was ahead. He used to say that with a small smile, like he found it interesting rather than frightening. She had never understood that until now, when she was so deep in the curve she couldn't see anything at all. She turned off the faucet, dried her hands, walked back out to the living room. Adisa was looking at her. "You okay?" her sister asked. "I'm fine," Imara said, and then she sat down and told her everything, because she had decided long ago that whatever came, she would not lie to her sister. Adisa listened without speaking. Then she said quietly, "We'll figure it out." She said it the way their mother used to say it, with a certainty that was not based on evidence but on something older and steadier than evidence. Imara nodded. "We will," she said, and she almost believed it. The new year came. Imara and Adisa moved their things into the apartment of a woman named Mrs. Oduya, a church friend of their mother's who lived in Decatur and had a small extra room. It was meant to be temporary, 1 month, maybe 2. Just until Imara got back on her feet. She kept looking for work. In January, she found a part-time position at a dry cleaner on Candler Road. The pay was $9 an hour, 3 days a week. It was not enough to save toward rent, but it was enough to help with groceries and to put a little toward eventually getting her own place again. She ironed shirts and sorted clothing and watched the clock and thought about what she would do next. One afternoon at the dry cleaner, a customer came in to pick up a suit, an older man, moving slowly, with a cane. He struggled with the door. Imara came from behind the counter and held it open for him. He nodded his thanks and said something kind. Nothing big. Just the ordinary kind of human acknowledgement that reminded you the world was still there. She thought of the man in the lobby. She still thought about him sometimes, wondered if he had recovered. She didn't know his name. She had never learned it. On a Wednesday morning in February, Imara arrived at the dry cleaner and found the owner, a Vietnamese woman named Ms. Lan, waiting for her at the counter with a look on her face that Imara had come to recognize. Business had slowed. She was letting the part-time staff go. She was very sorry. Imara said she understood. She walked out into the gray February morning and stood on the sidewalk for a long moment. The sky was the color of old dishwater. A bus went by. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing music from a phone. She had been out of work, real work, for almost 4 months now. She had applied to over 60 jobs. She had gone on 14 interviews. She had 1 month left of grace with Mrs. Oduya before the situation would become something different, something harder. Imara pulled her coat tighter and began walking. She didn't know where she was going, she just needed to move. By March, Mrs. Oduya had begun mentioning, gently, that her grandchildren might be coming to visit and might need the room. She never said anything directly, she was too kind for that. But Imara heard it, the way you hear things when you are listening for them, because you already know they're coming. Adisa heard it too. One night after Mrs. Oduya had gone to bed, she came and sat next to Imara on the small couch and leaned against her shoulder the way she used to when she was a little girl. "I can get a job after school," Adisa said. "No," Imara said. "I can do a few hours on weekends. It won't affect my grades." "No," Imara said again, more quietly. "That's not your job. Your job is school." Adisa didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "You never let anyone help you." Imara looked at her. "I let you help me. I mean really help." Imara put her arm around her sister and didn't answer, because there was no answer that was completely honest and also kind at the same time. That night she lay on the air mattress. She slept on in the corner of the small room and stared at the ceiling and thought about what came next. She thought through it quietly and carefully, the way she had been trained to think through situations at work. Assess, plan, act, but the assessment kept returning the same answer. Not enough. Not enough money. Not enough options. Not enough time. She closed her eyes. She did not sleep for a long time. It was a Saturday in late March when everything changed. Imara had taken the MARTA train downtown to drop off job applications in person at 3 hotels along Peachtree that she had found online. She believed, still, that showing up in person mattered, that it demonstrated something, that someone might look at her face and see what her resume couldn't show. She had just left the second hotel when she heard her name. At first she wasn't sure. She slowed her walking and looked around. The street was busy with Saturday morning foot traffic. Then she heard it again. "Excuse me." The woman in the grey coat. She turned. A man in a dark overcoat was standing on the sidewalk a few feet away, looking at her. He was tall and well-dressed, somewhere in his mid-50s, with close-cropped grey at his temples. He was holding a coffee cup in one hand and looking at her with an expression that was somewhere between certain and uncertain at the same time. Imara looked at him, and then she knew. It moved through her like a current, slow, then sudden. She knew that face. She had last seen it on a marble floor, gasping. He recognized her at almost the same moment. She could see it in his face. The slight shift, the eyes going wider, the way he lowered the coffee cup. "You were there," he said, "that night, in the lobby of Meridian Tower." Imara nodded once. "Yes." He was quiet for a second, just looking at her. Then he said, "My name is Franklin Achibi. I own the building you were working in that night." Imara heard that and was still for a moment. Then she said, "I'm Imara, Imara Sule." Franklin Achibi extended his hand. She shook it. "I've been trying to find you," he said. She frowned slightly. "Find me?" "I asked the security company for the name of the officer on duty that night. They told me there had been a personnel change and couldn't share that information." He paused. "I assumed that was their way of telling me what I already suspected." Imara looked at him steadily. "They let me go the next morning." Something passed through Franklin Achibi's face that she could not quite name. Not quite anger, not quite something else. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because of what you did for me. Because I violated policy," Imara said, and she said it plainly, without bitterness or self-pity, just as a fact. Franklin looked at her for a long time. "Would you have done anything differently?" he asked. Imara thought about it, really thought about it, the way she sometimes did late at night. She thought about the way his breathing had sounded in that empty lobby. She thought about the protocol handbook in the drawer of her desk. "No," she said, "I don't think I would." Franklin Achibi nodded slowly. He looked like a man who had just confirmed something he had been wondering about for a long time. "Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" he asked. "Or breakfast if you haven't eaten. I'd like to talk to you if you're willing." Imara was about to say no. She still had one more hotel to visit, and she did not like accepting things from people she didn't know. But something in his tone stopped her. Not the politeness of it, but the steadiness. He was not asking out of obligation. He was asking because he actually wanted to know something. "Okay," she said. They sat in a small cafe a half-block down. Franklin Achibi ordered without looking at the menu, the way people do when they spend a lot of time in a neighborhood and know the food by heart. He asked her what she wanted, and she ordered a coffee and said she wasn't hungry, which was only half true. He told her what the doctors had found after that night, a severe cardiac arrhythmia that had gone undetected for years, accelerated by stress and a punishing travel schedule. He had spent 4 days in the hospital. He had stents placed. He had gone through 3 months of cardiac rehabilitation. "The paramedics told me that whoever cleared my airway bought me time," he said. "That if I had been left on the floor for the full 6 minutes, there was a real chance I wouldn't have been able to tell you this story right now." Imara held her coffee cup and said nothing. "I want to thank you," he said. "You don't owe me anything," Imara said. "That's not why I'm saying it." He looked at her evenly. "I'm not thanking you because I owe you. I'm thanking you because what you did was real, and it matters to say so." She looked at him. She wasn't sure why those words hit her the way they did. Maybe because she had been carrying the other version for so long, the version where what she did was wrong, was a violation, was a risk that wasn't hers to take. To hear someone say it plainly, "What you did was real," made something shift inside her. She nodded. "You're welcome," she said quietly. They were quiet for a moment. Then Franklin said, "Tell me about yourself, if you don't mind." She did not usually do that with strangers. She was private by nature and by practice. 4 years of security work had reinforced her belief that most information was better held close than given freely. But she talked. She told him about Clark Atlanta, about the communications degree she had never really used. She told him about Collade, carefully, briefly, just the shape of it, not the interior. She told him about Adisa and about the 14 months at Meridian and about the 62 job applications she had sent in the months since. She kept her voice level. She was not asking for anything. She was just answering his question. Franklin listened without interrupting. He asked a question or two, quiet and specific. He did not perform sympathy or say the easy things. He just listened. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I run a company called Achibi Group. We develop commercial real estate, primarily in Atlanta and Charlotte. About 80 employees." He paused. "I've been looking for someone to lead the tenant services division. It's a coordination role, managing relationships between the company and the businesses that lease space in our buildings. Communication, problem solving, follow through." He looked at her steadily. "The person I hired 8 months ago wasn't a good fit. The role has been open for 6 weeks. Imara looked at him carefully. She was trying to hear what was underneath the words. "I don't have experience in property management," she said. "You have a communications degree," he said. "You spent 14 months learning a building from the inside. You've dealt with people under pressure. And," he said, "I watched you handle a crisis with your hands completely tied, and you still made the right call." Imara looked down at her coffee cup for a moment. "Mr. Achibi," she said, "I want to make sure I understand something. Go ahead. Are you offering me something because you feel like you owe me?" He didn't hesitate. "No, I'm offering you something because I think you're qualified and I need someone I can trust in that role." He paused. "Those are different things." She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "I would need to learn a lot." "There's a 2-month onboarding process," he said. "You'd be paired with someone from the team who knows the systems. After that, the role is yours to grow. Can I ask what the position pays?" he told her. Imara kept her face very still. It was more than she had made at Meridian, more than she had made at any of the jobs she had applied to in the past 4 months. It was enough to get her and Adisa back into their own place. It was enough to stop doing the math on that notepad every morning. "I would like to think about it," she said. He nodded like that was the right answer. "Of course. Take a few days." He reached into the inside pocket of his overcoat and put a business card on the table between them. "My direct number is on the back." Imara picked it up and put it in her purse. They sat for a few more minutes, finishing their coffee. He asked about Adisa, whether she was thinking about college. Imara said yes, that she was hoping for a scholarship. that she was strong in math. Franklin said he sat on the board of a foundation that offered STEM scholarships to first-generation college students. He said she should look into it. He said it the way people say things when they mean them, not to perform generosity, but because the information was relevant, and he had it to give. When they stood to leave, he thanked her again. Just once, simply. Not the way people thank you when they're trying to close something, but the way they thank you when the thing is still open, when it has changed something and they want to acknowledge that. Imara thanked him for the coffee. She walked to the train station in the March morning, with the business card in her purse and her coat pulled against the wind. She thought about what Franklin Achibi had said. Those are different things. And she thought about the night in the lobby, the cold marble floor, his breathing, her hands, the 6 minutes. She had not saved his life expecting it to mean anything beyond the moment. That was just what the moment had asked of her. She had answered. She thought about Kool-Aid and his curved roads, his small smile. She thought about Adisa saying, "You never let anyone help you." She thought about the 62 applications and the air mattress in Mrs. Oduya's spare room. Then she took out her phone and called her sister. "Hey," Adisa said. "What's up?" "I need to tell you something," Imara said. She was standing on the platform waiting for the train, and her voice was steady. "Something happened today." "Something bad?" "No," Imara said. And she realized, saying it, that she meant it completely. Something good. She told her about the sidewalk, the cafe, the man. She told her everything, the same way she had told her about the lost job and the eviction, and every hard thing before this. Adisa listened and was quiet for a moment after she finished. Then she said in a small voice, "Are you going to take it?" "Yes," Imara said. She hadn't known it until she said it, but once she said it, it was simply true. The train arrived. Imara stepped on, found a seat by the window. The city moved past her. The buildings, the streets, the ordinary morning lives of people going from one place to another. She watched it all go by and felt something she had almost forgotten the texture of. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter. Something that felt like ground under her feet after a long time of not knowing where the ground was. 3 months later, Imara sat in her own office on the 11th floor of Achabe Group's main building on Peachtree Center Avenue. It was small, a desk, a window, a whiteboard she had already covered in notes. She had spent the first 2 months learning everything she could. She had been the first to arrive and the last to leave most days, not because anyone asked her to, but because there was always more to understand. Her onboarding partner, a calm, methodical man named David Olu, who had been with the company for 9 years, had told her in her 5th week that she was one of the fastest learners he had worked with. She thanked him and went back to her notes. She had found an apartment for herself and Adisa in the West End, 2 bedrooms, with a small balcony. She had put up curtains. She had bought a kitchen table that wasn't second-hand. Adisa had put her college applications in, 5 schools, all with strong STEM programs, and had won a partial scholarship from Franklin's foundation, not full but significant, enough to make the rest manageable. Mrs. Oduya had come to see the new apartment. She had walked around and nodded and said, more than once, "Your mother would be so proud." Imara had said thank you and meant it all the way down. One morning, Franklin Achibi stopped by her office on his way to a site meeting. He sometimes did this, not to check on her, just to think out loud about a problem on one of the properties and see what she said. She had learned that this was how he worked best, by talking through things with people whose judgment he trusted. He stood in the doorway and told her about an issue with a long-term commercial tenant on the 3rd floor of one of the Charlotte buildings, a conflict over renovation terms that had been going back and forth for months with no resolution. He described it briefly and then asked her how she would approach it. Imara turned from her whiteboard and thought for a moment. Then she told him. Franklin listened. He asked one question. She answered it. He nodded slowly, the way he did when he was actually thinking rather than just responding. "Set up a call with the tenant for next Tuesday," he said. "You take the lead." She said she would. After he left, she turned back to her whiteboard. Outside her window, Atlanta stretched out in the spring morning, all its noise and movement and ordinary insistence on continuing. She looked at it for a moment. Then she picked up her marker and went back to work.